Hello and welcome to the Lore of the Cards podcast, the podcast that uses Hearthstone as a vehicle to unpack the dense and sometimes complex lore of the Warcraft universe. Today, we continue the Dragon Saga by actually looking at some dragons. Chapter 2, Galakrond, Father of Dragons, begins the story behind one of the pivotal legendaries in the Descent of Dragons set, and looks into the very beginning of the Dragon Aspect's journey. Many thousands of years ago, a solitary blue-white proto-dragon soared above the icy seas of its territory. While many of his kind were content with hunting grazing animals, Malygos enjoyed the challenge of hunting the tasty, blubber-rich creatures of the ocean, tracking vague shapes beneath the water and striking as they came up to the surface. Few proto-dragons intentionally sought out prey that was more difficult to catch. Malygos enjoyed the mental challenge, taking pride in these hunts, as he felt it proved him smarter than others of his kind. Malygos found very few other proto-dragons came to his hunting grounds, preferring warmer climates, but today was not one of those days. As the blue-white drake marked the final prey for his hunt, a shadow passed over him. Cautiously, Malygos ascended further into the heavens to meet with what had cast the shadow. He needed to be wary, as it was not unheard of for proto-drakes of different varieties to attack one another. A fiery orange shape darted past Malygos, the female proto-dragon coming to a stop a short distance away from the blue-white male. Almost immediately she told him that she did not want to fight him. This marked her as another intelligent proto-dragon, as those with lesser intelligence were not capable of speech. Malygos allowed the female to anxiously wait for his response. The swift of thought blue quickly searched the heavens for another orange drake and positioned himself a little above the female, giving him a more dominant position before responding. He too did not intend to fight. The orange drake assured Malygos she was alone and was looking for her clutch brother. This terminology would be used by dragons throughout the ages. It refers to dragons born from the same clutch of eggs, which are considered the closest of siblings. This relationship would grow all the more special over time, as while dragons evolved, their egg clutches would grow smaller. Malygos told the female he had not seen any more of her kind, but he would aid her in searching for her brother, as she had run out of the usual places to look. There was no fondness for the orange proto-dragon on Malygos' part. He revelled in moments where he could prove his cunning. As they travelled, Malygos would come to know the orange proto-dragon better, learning her name, Alexstrasza. Their search would lead them to a warmer, rocky landscape. This was where Alexstrasza had last seen her brother, but before Malygos could inspect the area, another proto-dragon appeared. This one a charcoal grey colour. It immediately made a beeline for the two companions. While Alexstrasza tried to make the other dragon aware they did not wish to fight, Malygos prepared for combat. This proto-dragon did not exhibit the mental quickness of Malygos and Alexstrasza. It was savage and feral, an unthinking beast, the behaviour exhibited by most modern-day proto-dragons. Working together, Malygos and Alexstrasza were able to force the feral drake into a retreat. While Malygos looked down on the beast as lesser than he, Alexstrasza empathised with it. She had not wanted to fight the proto-dragon, as it was lashing out in panic. Something had frightened it. The pair resumed their hunt for the missing clutch brother. With Malygos' intelligence, it would not take long. The brother was in the same area the fearful drake had attacked. What was left of him, anyway. Alexstrasza's sibling had perished violently. All that remained was a shriveled heap of skin and bone, the dragon's face twisted in an expression of agony, hinting that Alexstrasza's brother had suffered through the entire process that left his corpse in such a grisly fashion. Standing by the body of her brother, overcome with emotion, Alexstrasza let out a bone-chilling cry of anguish and mourning. As the fire-orange drake continued to grieve, Malygos noticed a shadow pass over them. Darting upwards, he sought to catch a glimpse of what may be the perpetrator of this heinous assault. The blue-white dragon frantically searched the area, only able to see thick cloud cover. Looking even higher above him, he caught a glimpse of something just dart out of sight into the clouds. It was gone. Malygos and Alexstrasza's paths would cross again during a relatively rare occurrence. A mass of proto-dragons of different colours gathered in one place, not inclined to fight one another. Rather than focusing their attention on their aggression toward one another, the proto-dragons were fixed on a vast herd of huge brown caribou-like creatures, perhaps distant ancestors of the shovel tusk. The hunting was too plentiful to worry about each other. As well as partaking in the hunt, the ever-inquisitive Malygos spent much of his time observing. His eye was caught by 3 dragons descending down upon their prey, 2 carting away fresh meals, while the smaller, yellowish female failed to judge her dive, almost colliding with the ground. Malygos' gaze stayed with this yellow dragon as she returned to the skies. Alexstrasza pulled up alongside the yellow proto-dragon and offered her kill, which the other dragon rejected with an angry snap. Undeterred by this aggression, the orange drake continued to fly beside her companion. Even at this young age, Alexstrasza exhibited the behaviour and personality she would carry with her through to the present day. Her kill hung limp in her mouth. Soon after catching the caribou, Alexstrasza bit through its neck, severing a vital vein and killing it as quickly as possible. Other proto-dragons would keep their prey alive until it was time to feed, preferring to consume it while still fresh. Rather than prolong the animal's suffering, the fire orange dragon had ended its life quickly. Her kindness and patience showed through in her interaction with the yellow dragon, highlighting her instinct to care for the helpless. Malygos would continue to observe the rest of his kind, particularly impressed with the technique of a brown male. The proto-dragon seemed almost clairvoyant. As it dove, the dragon's prey would weave in an unpredictable fashion in order to dodge the proto-dragon's attack, but no matter how much the prey moved, this dragon would strike in the perfect place at the perfect time. The same could not be said for the 2 feral dragons that dove at the same time. Frustrated their prey had eluded them, they turned, hissing and spitting at one another. The commotion they created attracted the attention of the other proto-dragons. The more intelligent looked on with disgust, while the feral looked on with caution, as those with kills already did not trust these 2 not to try and steal theirs. As Malygos took note of his surroundings while the 2 proto-dragons fought, his eyes would fall on a blue-green male sneering at the proto-drake pair, Malygos' arch-rival, Koros. The blue-green dragon was quick to repay Malygos' piercing stare with a hiss, plunging his muzzle into his kill and ripping a hunk of flesh from it as if hinting that was what he wanted to do to Malygos. The 2 had bitterly competed in the past over kills, territory, strength, and who was the more cunning. Malygos was considering renewing that rivalry there and then. The blue-white proto-dragon's attention was drawn away from Koros as the yellow drake that had failed to get a kill earlier landed near Malygos, snorting her frustration, closely followed by Alexstrasza, her prey still hanging from her mouth. The yellow addressed Malygos, telling him her sister had mentioned he had found their brother. Malygos was shocked, as Alexstrasza and this female were not the same colour, their smooth scales being the only indication they may be related, while most other proto-dragons had rough skin. The yellow went on, telling the blue that Alexstrasza and herself had been part of a small clutch. Only 3 eggs had survived, and now only 2 of them were left. Such a small clutch indicated ill tidings for a family. It sadly would also explain the yellow's existence, as most families would have killed a runt like her at birth. The yellow sat patiently, awaiting a response from Malygos. The blue-white dragon told her that he felt her brother's death was strange, and as the yellow leaned in closer with interest, asking how it may have happened and whether there was anyone else present, her sister chided her. Alexstrasza would call her by name, Ysera. This insipid yellow dragon paled in comparison to what she would become, the mighty green dragon aspect. Ysera and Alexstrasza snapped and hissed at one another as the orange had told the yellow not to discuss the death of their brother. Their argument would soon be broken up by a sound that would even dwarf the crack of thunder. It not only stopped the sisters arguing, but all the proto-dragons stopped whatever they were doing, waiting to find out what this sound was, and where it had come from. the sound erupted again, seeming to shake the very earth below the Proto-Dragon's feet. This sound was a colossal roar. From the overcast sky, a hulking form burst through with surprising swiftness. Galakrond descended from the sky. This was a Proto-Dragon of staggering proportion. No dragon then or since has even come close to matching Galakrond's size. Even the aspects would have been tiny in comparison. In the future, Galakrond would be referred to as the father of dragons, not because he had created the dragons of the modern age, though myths would later circulate stating he'd birthed them, but because when Galakrond's time had passed on Azeroth, the aspects arose, a kind of passing of the torch. With Galakrond now in the sky, every Proto-Drake landed. They dare not trespass in Galakrond's domain. The sky was now his. The giant dragon tore through the air with such speed that the winds left in his wake were powerful enough to knock the normal-sized Proto-Dragons off their feet. Turning with remarkable agility for his size, Galakrond's focus fell upon the now hysterical herd of animals. Swooping down, Galakrond grasped hold of two of the beasts in each of his rear claws, and one in his mouth. By the time Galakrond had readied for another dive, all 5 animals had travelled down his gullet. The dragon's hunger was not yet sated. He rounded once again upon his prey. This time, just before reaching the panicked grazers, Galakrond halted suddenly in the air. The wind created by his wings sent the animals flying. As they tried to stand, Galakrond bared down on them and swallowed down many in an instant. Malygos observed at least 8 of the helpless creatures were gulped down. Seemingly content, Galakrond catapulted his bulk back into the clouds and out of sight. A few moments passed before the other Proto-Dragons dared move. There was no use hunting now. The caribou had been scattered by Galakrond's attack, and many Proto-Drakes had been left shaken from just witnessing the giant's might. Some drakes would fly to find calmer surroundings, while others, including Malygos, Alexstrasza and Ysera, remained where they were, in a subdued, almost silent state. The quiet would be broken with hearty laughter. A charcoal grey Proto-Dragon, a little larger than his fellows, sneered at the others of his kind. This dragon mocked the rest. "Little hatchlings, afraid of the sky, afraid of the ground. Galakrond laughs at you for being afraid, and I, Neltharion, do too." While Neltharian's condescension was not well received by the other Proto-Drakes hissing in his direction, none took further action. The large charcoal grey clearly had the strength to back up his taunt, and even the feral drakes were not going to start a fight. They could not win. Not long after Malygos watched Neltharion depart, he too decided to do the same. He had eaten his fill, and now all the blue dragon desired was to find his remote cavern, to nap and digest his food. Suddenly, something collided with Malygos, hitting him hard, causing him to lose control and start to plummet toward the ground. As Malygos struggled to regain control, he caught sight of his assailant. Koros and a dragon with the same colouring had attacked him. Koros and his companion dived after Malygos, who had been able to slow but not end his descent. With the 2 dragons bearing down on him, Malygos shot forth a spray of icicles from his maw. Koros was able to dodge the attack, but his friend fared a lot worse, the icicles shredding one of the Proto-Drake's wings. Malygos' small victory was short-lived, as a 3rd dragon would come and strike the blue. The coordinated attack suggested Koros had set it up while the other dragons were distracted by Galakrond. Koros let fly a breath attack of his own, a veil of smoke draped over Malygos, the blue fighting for air as the gas sealed off his airways. As Malygos struggled for oxygen, the injured drake re-entered the fray, diving toward the blue, jaws open, seeking to rip out Malygos' throat. Just before the bite could be administered, Koros' ally, with a sound akin to thunder, suddenly dropped from the sky. This was immediately followed by the hearty laugh of Neltharion, the grey immediately flying to grapple Koros. With mirth, the grey told Koros' band if they wanted to fight, they could fight him. This was not how Koros had planned this encounter, but he was not going to back down even with the bulky grey now aiding Malygos. The blue-green dragon opened his mouth to fire off his breath attack once again, but just before the gas left Koros' mouth, Neltharion smashed his lower jaw, slamming shut the blue-green's mouth. Koros was afflicted by his own attack. Pulling away from Neltharion, he frantically clawed at his own mouth that had been sealed shut. Koros was so desperate he tore away chunks of his flesh to get his mouth open. While Koros struggled, Neltharion looked on in amusement, too enraptured to notice one of Koros' allies flying in. The Proto-Drake gripped Neltharion by the throat, but by this time Malygos had recovered. Before the blue-green could sink his teeth into Neltharion's neck, Malygos tore it away, scoring the dragon with 2 precise strikes along its wings and neck. Each drake injured, Koros and the other 2 blue-green drakes retreated, Neltharion antagonising them as they fled. The cowards had barely given the mighty grey a fight at all. With Koros out of sight, the Grey turned to Malygos, congratulating him on his fighting prowess. Though, quick to point out, the Blue was not as seasoned a fighter as Galakrond or Neltharion himself. Malygos thanked Neltharion for his assistance, who would in turn thank him for partnering with him for a good fight. Despite the two having their differences, different coloured scales and personalities, Neltharion savoured combat whereas Malygos only fought when necessary, Neltharion proclaimed the two brothers in blood. Remembering Neltharion's earlier mention of the Leviathan, Malygos brought up Galakrond. He was curious as to why the mighty Proto-Dragon had appeared. Galakrond had never hunted in this area before. With some thought, Neltharion concluded that there was more food within this area, which worried Malygos, as this was where the other Proto-Dragons hunted. With a hunter like Galakrond in the area, they would not be able to compete. As Malygos was expressing his concerns, something caught his eye. An eager Neltharion thought the icy blue had noticed the return of Koros. Perhaps it was time for round 2, but this was not the case. Malygos landed, Neltharion in tow, in the location where he thought he'd seen something. There was nothing. Just as they were about to leave, Malygos saw it again. Whirling to face it, nothing was there. His body tensed as words that were not his own thoughts entered his mind. So powerful a sensitivity. Neither he nor Neltharion would see who spoke within Malygos' mind, unaware of the slight rippling in the landscape, just a little bigger than a large human. Some time later, Alexstrasza and her sister Ysera would seek out Malygos. The two females had happened upon a purple proto-dragon. This male was not in a sound state of mind, as he had witnessed something truly horrific. He claimed he had seen Galakrond feed on his own kind. Different proto-drake broods would frequently disagree with one another and fight, only usually trusting others of the same scale colour. While proto-dragons would kill each other through fights between broods, they would never devour their own. It was frowned upon and thought disgusting by every single proto-dragon type. Given the extreme nature of the purple dragon's claims, Ysera could not bring herself to believe him, but Alexstrasza thought the panicking purple statement may at least have some merit, and was worth following up on, especially since the panicking drake had seen the corpse of one of the victims. Greatly valuing Malygos' deductive skills and intellect, the two sisters would invite the blue to the site of the supposed feeding. There were multiple dead proto-dragons in the vicinity. One was once ivory, but now a dusty white. The corpse was in a similar state to that of the sisters' brothers when it had been found by Malygos. The ivory dragon's face twisted into an expression of agony. Not far from this was a second corpse, left in very much the same desiccated state, one of Malygos' own flight. The blue had known this dragon. They were of a similar age, and in life the corpse had been Taris. As youngsters, Malygos and Taris had flown together as they were taught the tactics of hunting. This was only the start of Galakrond's alleged slaughter, the purple claiming to have witnessed the dragon kill a dozen more of his own kind. Reliving the memories, all the purple drake could say was, "Swallowed them up. Swallowed them up." Ysera saw a flaw in the dragon's recounting of his experiences. If these dragons had been swallowed up, how could their corpses be laying before them? Seemingly unaware of Ysera's probing, the purple dragon continued. Swallowed them up. Swallowed them up. Alexstrasza calmed the purple dragon as Malygos inspected the bodies. The blue was more or less in agreement with Ysera, figuring the mad purple was just babbling, but always wanting to be useful and appear intelligent to his two friends. Malygos continued his investigation, asking the purple if there were more bodies. The purple nervously replied there were, and eyed a high ridge off to the west. Only by approaching it would Malygos be able to look over the ridge and continue his observations. As the blue neared the ridge's peak, he noticed something peculiar in the dirt behind him. Turning, Malygos stooped down for a closer look. It was as if a creature of a similar size to a proto-dragon had dragged itself along the ground and over the ridge. Malygos stooped further to sniff the indentation. The stench was pungent, peculiar, and somehow familiar. At that moment, Malygos heard rocks clatter just the other side of the ridge. Whirling round, the blue was met by a blood-chilling sight. Another of the corpses, but this one was moving toward him. White, sunken eyes, its skin peeling away and hunks of flesh missing from all over its body. With the horror looming down on him, Malygos acted decisively, spraying the walking corpse with icicles from his mouth. What would have immobilized most living creatures only partially slowed the undead, and it was not long before it was on top of Malygos. The smell of decaying flesh filled the icy blue's nose, and yellow teeth gnashed around his throat, but not quite managing to strike it. Malygos inhaled for another icy assault. But the undead surprised Malygos with a breath attack of its own. Since the dragon was dead, it did not breathe in to telegraph its attack. The putrid green cloud that spilled from the undead's mouth entered the orifices of the blue's head. Malygos' eyes burned as he felt almost as if he was rotting from within. The move debilitated him, the blue dragon falling to his knees. Seeing her friend in need, Alexstrasza quickly came to Malygos' aid, spitting a searing ball of fire at the undead while Ysera pulled the blue out of harm's way. The dried out corpse burnt well, but it was still not defeated. Malygos told Ysera to release him. He hadn't fully recovered from the undead's attack, but knew he must help his friend. The undead ominously marched on, even with ice and flame working in unison, but it was flagging. Pieces of its body peeled away, pieces of skin, an arm, its tail, until it was torn to shreds. The corpse collapsed, shattering as the body hit the ground. As Alexstrasza breathed a sigh of relief, Malygos immediately turned around and darted back the way he came. He could not see the purple dragon, assuming he had hidden, but that was not Malygos' concern. As the icy blue came toward it, the corpse of the ivory drake was twitching to life. Without a second thought, Malygos plunged his teeth into the decaying flesh of the soon-to-be abomination. The proto-dragon tore away chunks of decomposing flesh and pieces of bone as the newly awaking corpse struggled. With one final effort, Malygos tore the head of the ivory corpse off and flung it away. The jaw chattered for a few moments before going still. While Malygos spat out the foul-tasting, rotten remains from its mouth, Ysera and Alexstrasza tore into the other corpse. They had not seen it move, but they would shred it before it had a chance to. The two immediate threats removed, Alexstrasza came upon a blood-chilling realization. The purple dragon had said many had died. No sooner did she have that thought, the trio heard a desperate cry far away. It seemed the purple proto-dragon had not escaped the dead after all. Unable to aid the poor maddened Drake in his final moments, the three friends fled. Not much time would pass before it turned out the mad ravings of the purple dragon were in fact true. The sky was littered with panicking proto-dragons as the Goliath Galakrond ploughed through the air. Malygos too was present, and he watched with shock and horror as the deceptively swift Galakrond worked his way through the other proto-dragons, his maw gaping before closing down around a dragon and swallowing it whole. The giant had changed from the last time the blue had seen him, appearing even larger, but this was not the only change. Growths had begun to litter the monster's body, the area around its gullet looking particularly distorted. Galakrond had once been smaller than the day he came and disrupted the Proto-Dragon hunt. He had once hunted alongside his fellow Proto-Dragons, well respected and even somewhat revered by others of his kind. As Malygos watched and wondered how Galakrond had transformed into such a being of evil, he suddenly felt something collide with him. As the future aspects struggled to regain control, he was just able to catch a glimpse of an unmistakable sneer. Koros. Malygos was able to regain control, but before he could chase after and deal with his petulant rival, he noticed too late Galakrond's open mouth. Before Malygos could even react, the massive Proto-Drake's jaws shut around him. Galakrond's breath alone almost made Malygos pass out. Just before being swallowed, Malygos was saved by Neltharion. The Grey attacked Galakrond's throat just before the Great Worm swallowed. The shock of Neltharion's attack caused Galakrond to cough up the blue. Without much goading from Neltharion, Malygos flew as fast as he could to escape the deformed Galakrond. Neltharion closely followed behind Malygos because even though Galakrond was hacking, the Leviathan was still swiping at his assailant. Galakrond's huge claw managed to close in around Neltharion, about to crush the life out of his arrogant attacker, but again the monster was thwarted. This time from a fierce blast of sand-like breath half blinding him. Galakrond shook off the attack, unable to see the brown-coloured Proto-Drake that had blasted him. The wise Proto-Dragon having veered away. Galakrond had also let Neltharion escape with Malygos, but the Juggernaut soon tracked the Grey down, swiping and missing, but managing to catch Neltharion with his thick tail. As Galakrond lined up his final assault, Neltharion plummeted toward the ground. The stunned Grey would run into some luck. A panicking yellow Proto-Dragon flew near Galakrond. The starving giant would much rather hunt this easier prey than catching the hurtling Neltharion, and gave chase. To save the friend that had rescued him from certain death, Malygos entered into a nosedive. To the Blue's dismay, it appeared he would not catch his friend before he collided with the ground below. Luckily, Neltharion was not Malygos' only friend. Alexstrasza rose up from the clouds below and collided with Neltharion. Grunting through the strain, pushing up from below, Alexstrasza was able to slightly slow the descent of the hefty Grey. It was enough for Malygos to catch up, who seized the unconscious Neltharion by his shoulders. After recovering, Alexstrasza would join Malygos in heaving Neltharion. With the threat of Galakrond now gone, they surveyed the area. It was very much as it had been before. No sign of struggle or chaos. No blood marked the ground, as all the starving Galakrond's victims had been swallowed whole. So many had been consumed by the beast that this seeming lack of activity made his attack all the more terrifying. In the distance, all that could be heard was the stomach-churning retching as Galakrond regurgitated the parts of his victims that could not be digested. With the threat of the undead and Galakrond, the different Proto-Dragon flights did not have time for their petty squabbling. They were band together in solidarity, which would aid them in survival. But this did not stop the bloodshed. Landscapes had become near barren, any signs of life either hiding or consumed by the terrifying Galakrond. Only a few bird varieties flew between the trees. Malygos and two of his flights were the victims of an undead ambush. Malygos' two travel companions were lost before he could even react, but that did not stop the feeling of guilt swelling inside him as he flew as fast as he could to escape the 7 undead assailants, which the Proto-Drakes would name the Not Living. After outrunning his attackers, Malygos would meet with Neltharion, who would deliver even more dire news. Malygos had been travelling to a gathering of Proto-Dragons. The roost at which they were to meet had become compromised, so Neltharion had found the Blue to tell him of the new meeting place, starting with the good news that both Ysera and Alexstrasza were fine. Malygos was also informed that Zorix had fallen, a golden Proto-Dragon who had been leading the Proto-Dragon alliance. His mate Talanixia had now asserted herself into the position of commanding her fellows, a development Malygos was not too pleased with, as while Talanixia was cunning, she could be prone to brash and boisterous action, which could endanger their entire race. Neltharion and Malygos would fly with speed and caution to their new meeting place, making sure that they saw no signs of Galakrond. The deceptively swift dragon could be upon them in a matter of moments if they were not careful. As they drew closer to their final destination, the two companions caught sight of 4 proto-dragons coming from the north. Trepidation crept over the two, Neltharion observing, "No one is north. North is bad." As the 4 dragons came closer, the two could see, to their relief, that they were not undead, though they weren't much better. At the head of this small group flew Koros. While Neltharion itched to fight Koros and his gang, Malygos remained calm. Their enemies were now the not living. Their enemies were now the not living in Galakrond. When asked what he had been doing to the north, Koros remained fairly cryptic, explaining he had been scouting on behalf of Talanixia. When questioned on why, Koros merely replied that she planned. This worried Malygos, as it seemed the headstrong, impulsive and dominating Talanixia's command was already being heeded by the rest of the Proto-Dragons. With not much learnt from their supposed ally, Neltharion grew impatient. It was time to fly to the meeting place, an activity that Malygos and Neltharion did quicker than Koros. Races would be used to establish dominance and strength among proto-dragons. They came to a bowl-shaped valley, where scores of their kind gathered cautiously. They remained hidden for now, but it was thought their previous roost was safe too. Within the valley, members of nearly every proto-dragon family gathered, even some the two future aspects had never come across. Tensions ran high, as many of these families were not on friendly terms with one another, forced into cooperating due to the extreme circumstances they now found themselves in. The volatile atmosphere was perpetuated further by the bestial drakes being present too, still loyal to their families but lacking the intellect to keep themselves in check. They needed to be constantly herded by their more intelligent brethren. A loud hiss pierced through the constant noise, causing the rest of those gathered to pay attention to the sound's creator. Talanixia's presence was as dominating as her voice. A large female with only some of the largest males, like Neltharion, outweighing her. Even with the dull, overcast sky, her golden scales shimmered, her black, piercing eye sweeping over all those that had gathered. Before Talanixia spoke, Malygos and Neltharion found Alexstrasza and Ysera among the throng. Many other proto-dragons would stare at the 4. They had chosen to stand away from their families. Their friendship was an odd one among their kind. As Talanixia began her speech, Koros landed beside her. Clearly the wretch had been able to curry favour with the golden female. Talanixia's voice boomed within the valley. "More have come. We are many. Say it. We are many." To Malygos' annoyance, most of the other proto-dragons did as she requested. While Talanixia was rallying her allies, the manner in which she did so risked giving away their position. As Talanixia blustered, Ysera muttered to her friends. She wished to approach the Galakrond issue in a different way. She believed fighting the Great Worm was not the best course of action. Finding peace was. It was not a sentiment her sister shared, though Alexstrasza could at least agree with Ysera that Talanixia's method was unlikely to win out. As the two sisters began to argue over the merits of fighting and peace, Koros whispered into Talanixia's ear. Talanixia roared Koros's discoveries. The north was clear of the not living, and they had picked up on Galakrond's trail. While many of the proto-dragons hissed and nodded their approval, some still clearly remained sceptical of Talanixia's methods. Malygos noting the brown that had aided in saving him and Neltharion being one of those concerned by Talanixia's sway over her fellows. Talonixia would bring an end to her short rally by proclaiming that the Gathering would soon fight Galakrond, but more needed to be gathered. The Proto-Dragons would gather again when the moons were round. With that, the Gathering was disbanded. And with that, we'll bring an end to this chapter of the Dragon Saga. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please support the podcast in any way you can. Like, share, subscribe and turn on notifications on YouTube, review it on iTunes and follow on Spotify. You can follow me on Twitter @LoreOfTheCards. Next time we'll continue the story of Gul'dan, and after that the next chapter of the Dragon Saga, Making a Monster. Thanks for tuning in, it means the world to me, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.